Let me tell you something that most people completely misunderstand about avoidant partners. They don't leave because they don't feel anything. They leave because they feel too much and they don't know how to handle it. And here's the part almost nobody talks about. The moment you stop chasing them, the moment your energy shifts, the moment you stop reacting to their inconsistency, that's when they start thinking about you again. That's when they come back. But here's the problem. Most people ruin that moment before it even begins. So what I'm going to do here is show you exactly how to act in a way that makes an avoidant not just come back, but feel like they can't stay away from you. And this isn't about playing games. This is about understanding a psychology that they don't even understand about themselves, because avoidants are not wired the way you think. They are wired for distance, not disconnection. They crave love, but they fear what love demands. So in the beginning, everything feels easy. They open up, they pursue, they show interest. Because at that stage, there's no pressure yet, no expectations, no emotional weight. But the moment things start to feel real, the moment they feel like they could lose control, they pull back. Not because you did something wrong, but because closeness triggers something deep inside them. A fear they don't even fully understand. If I get too close, I'll lose myself. If I depend on someone, I'll get hurt. So they create space, and here's where everything usually goes wrong. You feel the distance, and you panic. You text more, you try to fix it, you try to pull them back in. But what that does is it confirms their fear. This is too much. I need space, so they pull away even more, and eventually they leave. But here's the twist most people never see. When they leave, the pressure disappears. And when the pressure disappears, their feelings come back. That's why avoidants so often return. Not because they suddenly change, but because the environment changed. And if you don't understand that, you'll repeat the same cycle over and over again. Because most people react emotionally. Instead of intentionally, they think, if I just show them how much I care, if I just explain things better, if I just love them harder, they'll come back. But to an avoidant, more emotion feels like more pressure. More attention feels like expectation. And more chasing feels like suffocation. So instead of coming closer, they go further away. And suddenly you're stuck in this cycle. You chase, they withdraw. You pursue, they disappear. You try harder, they shut down. And now you're doing all the work in something that used to feel effortless. So what actually works? Not chasing, not pretending you don't care, and not playing games. What works is something much more powerful: emotional self-possession. That means you don't collapse when they pull away. You don't overreact. You don't chase for reassurance. Instead, you stay grounded. You stay centered. And most importantly, you become someone they can't predict. Because what attracts an avoidant is emotional safety without emotional pressure. They need to feel, I can come closer without being consumed. And when you become that person, everything starts to shift. They start thinking about you more. They start missing you. They start feeling drawn back. So how do you actually act like this? First, you stop chasing and you start choosing. There's a difference between wanting someone and needing someone. Avoidance can feel neediness instantly. So instead of asking, how do I get them back? You shift to, do they deserve access to me? That one shift changes everything. Because now you're not chasing them, you're evaluating them. And that creates attraction. Second, you don't reward distance. When an avoidant disappears and then comes back like nothing happened, most people welcome them back instantly. No boundaries, no questions, no standards. And what that teaches them is simple. I can leave and still keep this person. Instead, you stay warm but grounded. You don't punish them, but you don't over-invest either. You make it clear without saying it directly. Access to me requires consistency. That's how respect is built. Third, you become harder to read in a healthy way. Avoidants are used to predictability. People chasing them, waiting for them, being available all the time. But when you become busy, fulfilled, emotionally independent, something shifts. They feel uncertainty, and uncertainty creates curiosity. Curiosity creates attraction. And finally, you master your reactions, because your reactions teach people how to treat you. If they pull away and you panic, you lose power. If they pull away and you stay calm, you gain power. Your silence becomes strength, not as a tactic, but as a reflection of your stability. And here's what starts happening inside their mind. Why aren't they chasing me? Did I lose them? Why do I feel like I care more now? And for the first time, they feel what you used to feel: uncertainty, curiosity, desire. Because attraction grows in space, not pressure. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because when they do come back, most people make one critical mistake that pushes them away again. And if you don't understand this part, you'll lose them a second time. But if you get it right, this is where everything changes. This is where they stop running and start staying. If you've ever felt confused by someone pulling away, or wondered why someone who seemed so into you suddenly disappeared, understand this: it's not always about your value. Sometimes it's about their capacity, but your power comes from how you respond. And if you want to become the kind of person people don't walk away from, but feel drawn back to, make sure you stay tuned, because what comes next is where most people either win or lose the connection completely. So now they come back. And this is the moment where everything either falls apart again or finally starts to work. Because what you do here matters more than anything you've done before. Most people think the hard part is getting them back. It's not. The hard part is what you do when they return. Because if you go back to how things were before, you'll get the same outcome. They'll come close, then pull away again, and you'll find yourself right back in the same cycle. So when they reach out, when they text, when they suddenly reappear, you have to understand something very clearly. This is not the moment to overgive. This is not the moment to prove your worth. And this is definitely not the moment to act like nothing happened. Because if you do that, you erase all the progress you made. Instead, you respond with calm, controlled self-respect. When they message you, you don't rush to reply instantly. Not to play games, but because your life is full. Your attention is not sitting there waiting for them. And when you do respond, you're warm, but not overly invested. There's no emotional flooding, no over-explaining, no trying to lock them down immediately, just calm presence. Because what you're showing them is this: I'm open, but I'm not available for inconsistency. And that message doesn't need to be spoken, it's felt. Now, here's where most people lose control. The avoidant comes back, and suddenly all the old emotions return. You feel relief, you feel excitement, you feel hope. And without realizing it, you start over-investing again. You reply faster, you give more attention, you become more available, and slowly you slip back into chasing. That's the trap. Because the moment they feel that shift, the moment they sense pressure again, they start pulling back. So instead, you stay consistent in your energy, not hot and cold, not distant and then overly eager, just stable. And stability is something avoidants are not used to. It feels different to them. It feels safe without feeling controlling, and that's what keeps them around. Now let's talk about something subtle but incredibly important. When they come back, they will often test the connection, not consciously, but emotionally. They might disappear for a bit again. They might reply inconsistently. They might act unsure. And in those moments, they're watching you. They're watching how you react, because they're asking themselves one question: is this going to feel overwhelming again? And your reaction answers that question. If you become anxious, if you start chasing, if you try to force clarity, their answer becomes, yes, this is too much. And they retreat. But if you stay grounded, if you don't overreact, if you allow space without losing yourself, their answer becomes, this feels different. And that's when they start leaning in. Now, here's another shift that changes everything. You stop focusing on keeping them, and you start focusing on observing them. You notice their effort. You notice their consistency. You notice whether their actions match their words. Because now, you're not trying to win them over. You're deciding if they deserve a place in your life. And that energy is incredibly powerful because for the first time, they feel like they could lose you, not because you're threatening to leave, but because you're not clinging to them anymore. And that creates something they rarely feel. Desire mixed with respect. Now, let's talk about communication, because this is where people often overcomplicate things. When they come back, you don't need a long emotional conversation right away. You don't need to unpack everything immediately. In fact, doing that too soon can push them away again instead. You rebuild the connection gradually through lightness, through presence, through shared moments, because emotional intensity too early feels like pressure to them. And pressure is what they run from. So you allow things to grow naturally. But at the same time, you don't ignore patterns. If inconsistency shows up again, you don't chase it. You don't fix it. You step back and let them feel the space, because space is what creates awareness for them. It's what makes them realize what they could lose. And here's something most people don't understand. Avoidants don't respond to pressure. They respond to absence, not total disappearance, but emotional absence. The absence of chasing, the absence of overgiving, the absence of needing them to stay. And when that absence is felt, it creates a pull, a curiosity, a desire to come closer. Now, this doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you punish them. It means you remain self-contained. You give, but you don't give everything. You care, but you don't lose yourself in it. And that balance is what makes them stay. Because now the connection feels different. It feels lighter, safer, less demanding, but more meaningful. And that's the paradox. The less you try to hold on to them, the more they want to hold on to you. And this is where most people finally start to see the shift. They notice the avoidant reaching out more. They notice more consistency. They notice more effort. And it's not because you forced it. It's because you created the right environment for it. And in the next part, I'm going to show you something even more powerful, because there are specific psychological triggers that make an avoidant not just return, but emotionally attach. And once you understand these, you'll stop feeling confused and start feeling in control of the dynamic. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about changing them. It's about changing how you show up. And when you do that, everything else follows. Now, this is where things start to get even more powerful. Because up to this point, you've changed your energy, you've stopped chasing, you've become grounded, you've created space. And that alone is enough to make an avoidant come back. But if you want them to stay, if you want them to actually feel attached to you, then you need to understand something deeper. Attraction brings them back, but emotional safety is what makes them stay. And the way you create that is through how you communicate, not just what you say, but how you say it and when you say it. Because with an avoidant, timing, tone, and space matter more than words. So let's talk about texting, because this is where most people lose all their progress. When an avoidant starts reaching out again, most people feel excited and they over-engage. They reply instantly. They send long messages. They try to build momentum quickly. And without realizing it, they recreate pressure. So instead, you slow everything down, not in a forced way, but in a grounded way. You match the energy, but you don't exceed it. If they send a simple message, you don't respond with a paragraph. If they take time to reply, you don't suddenly become hyper-available. You stay balanced, because what you're doing is creating a rhythm, and that rhythm feels safe to them. Now, here's something subtle, but incredibly important. Your texts should not feel heavy. Avoidants don't bond through intensity. They bond through ease. So instead of deep emotional conversations right away, you keep things light, playful, curious. You allow the connection to breathe, because when something feels easy, they stay longer. When something feels intenser, they start looking for an exit. Now, this doesn't mean you never go deeper. It means you earn that depth over time. And when you do, you introduce it in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. Instead of saying, "Where is this going?" you might say, "I enjoy spending time with you. Let's see where this goes." Same idea, completely different energy. One creates pressure, the other creates space. And space is where an avoidant feels safe enough to move closer. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful psychological triggers: scarcity. Not fake scarcity, but real, authentic, life-driven scarcity. You have your own life, your own priorities, your own focus. So your attention is not constantly available. And because of that, your presence becomes more valuable. Because people don't value what is always there. They value what they can lose. And this is especially true for avoidance. The moment they feel like you're always there, no matter what they do, they relax too much. They stop investing. But when they feel like they actually have to show up to keep you, they lean in. Now here's another trigger that most people completely overlook: emotional contrast. Avoidants are used to emotional extremes. Either people are chasing them or pulling away completely. But when you show up, calm, consistent, but not overly attached, you become different from what they're used to. And that difference creates intrigue, because now they don't feel pressure, but they also don't feel like they have full control. And that balance keeps them engaged. Now let's go deeper, because this is where emotional attachment actually begins. Avoidants don't attach through words. They attach through experience, through how they feel around you. So your goal is not to convince them to stay. Your goal is to create an experience they don't want to lose. That means when you're with them, you're present. You're not anxious. You're not overthinking. You're enjoying the moment. And that feeling becomes associated with you. So when they're away from you, they miss how they felt, not just who you are. And that's what creates real attachment. Now, here's something important. You don't try to lock them in emotionally too quickly, because the moment they feel trapped, they pull away. Instead, you allow them to move at their pace while maintaining your standards. And that's a powerful combination, because now they feel free, but they also feel the risk of losing you. And when those two things exist together, attachment grows. Now let's talk about consistency, because this is where everything either builds or breaks. You don't become unpredictable in a chaotic way. You become predictable in your self-respect. You respond calmly. You don't overact. You don't chase. And over time, they start to trust that. They start to feel like this connection isn't going to overwhelm them. And once that trust begins to build, they start opening up more. They start staying longer. They start investing, not because you forced it, but because they feel safe enough to do it. And this is the shift most people never reach, because they try to control the outcome instead of controlling their presence. But when you focus on how you show up, everything else starts aligning naturally. And in the next part, I'm going to show you the final piece of this, because there's one thing that determines whether an avoidant becomes consistent or keeps repeating the same cycle. And once you understand this, you stop feeling like you're guessing and start feeling like you actually understand the dynamic. Because at the end of the day, this isn't about chasing someone to stay. It's about becoming someone they don't want to lose. And that changes everything. Now, this is the part where everything either stabilizes or falls apart again. Because up to now, you've created attraction, you've created space, you've created curiosity. But attraction alone does not create consistency. And this is where most people get stuck. They think, if they're coming back, that means it's working. But coming back is not the same as staying, because an avoidant can come back again and again and again without ever becoming consistent. So the real question becomes, how do you shift this from a cycle into something stable? And the answer is this: you stop accepting potential and start responding only to consistency. This is the line that changes everything, because as long as you keep rewarding their occasional effort, they will continue giving you occasional effort. But the moment your energy shifts to, I only invest in what is consistent, something changes. Now they have to meet you there, or they lose access to you. And this is not something you say. This is something you demonstrate through your actions, through your responses, through your boundaries. If they show up consistently, you open up more. If they become inconsistent, you step back. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just calmly. Because now you're no longer reacting, you're responding. And that difference is everything. Now here's what starts happening on their side. They begin to feel something new. Accountability, not because you demanded it, but because your presence requires it. And for an avoidant, this is unfamiliar because most people either chase them or walk away completely. But you stayed grounded, you stayed self-respecting. And that creates a different kind of connection. One that doesn't feel controlling, but also doesn't feel loose. It feels. Now let's address something honestly, because this is important. Not every avoidant will rise to this level. Not every avoidant will meet you in consistency. And this is where your power is truly tested, because your strength is not in making them stay. Your strength is in being willing to walk away if they don't. And that's not loss. That's alignment. Because the goal here was never just to make someone come back. The goal is to create something that actually works, something that feels stable, something that feels mutual, something that doesn't require you to constantly chase or overthink or hold everything together. And when you reach that point, you start to notice something powerful. You're no longer focused on them. You're focused on what you're experiencing, how they show up, how they treat you, how the connection feels. And that shift is what changes your entire dating life. Because now you're not trying to be chosen, you're choosing. And the moment you truly step into that, you stop attracting confusion, you stop tolerating inconsistency, and you start experiencing real connection. Now here's the irony in all of this. The less you try to hold onto an avoidant, the more they want to hold onto you. Not because you manipulated anything, but because you finally created the one thing they need most without even realizing it: emotional safety without pressure. And when that exists, they don't feel the need to run. They feel the desire to stay. So if you've been dealing with someone who pulls away, if you've been stuck in that cycle of closeness and distance, understand this. The answer was never in chasing harder. It was in showing up differently. And once you do that, everything changes. Now, if this resonated with you, if you've started to see your situation in a new way, then the next step is learning how to apply this consistently, because knowing this and actually living it are two very different things. So if you want to become the kind of person who naturally creates attraction, who doesn't get pulled into emotional chaos, and who builds connections that actually last, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because everything here is about giving you that edge. And if you want to go even deeper, there's another video waiting for you that breaks down exactly how to handle mixed signals and turn them into clarity. Click on that next, and I'll see you there.